Hi, I'm Dave Thomas, and I am thrilled to be on Don't Be Alone with Jake Hogan. See, I really know this show so well.
Don't be alone with Jake Hogan.
Hi, Hogan Nation, and welcome to Don't Be Alone with Jake Hogan. We're in the beautiful Don't Be Alone studios, and we have, yet again, another amazing show for you today. I was a nerdy kid, used to sit around watching TV and being entertained by geniuses. And instead of doing anything athletic, I would just stay home and watch stuff. And one of the great things that popped on in my life around the time that I was reading Mad Magazine and National Lampoon was showing up was SCTV. SCTV was supposedly a network that showed TV shows, so it was an excuse to do parodies of TV shows. And it was so funny and so sharp and so interesting that it just took my generation by storm. Everybody I knew loved SCTV, and we loved the people who made SCTV. And one of the people who were directly responsible for making SCTV is one of my guests today. His name is Dave Thomas, and he was part of SCTV. He was part of Grace Under Fire. He's obviously the McKenzie Brothers. He's part of Second City in general. He's people don't know he's also a director. He's also a writer, not just performer. He's a producer. He's a creative entity, and he's spent his life doing something very interesting, which is he has driven his career in different directions where other people would be stuck in one gear and let their career sort of fade away. He's been able to turn right or turn left, go to drama, go to animation, do things. And I'm always impressed by that. I'm always impressed by people who can sort of see the future or feel in their gut, best place to go, and then go there. Dave Thomas seems to be one of those guys, and we'll find out more about him coming up. But before we do, I'm going to encourage you to write to me at dbawjk@gmail.com with all your questions, your suggestions, and your listener mail. I need your listener mail questions. Please write in. We also have a new Substack, so come look for the show on the Substack, and you'll find bonus material and other things and a community to talk to. That'll be fun to share your notes about Don't Be Alone with Jake Hogan. I'm really enjoying the positive feedback I'm getting, and I want you to be part of it, and I like having a direct conversation with you, so please actually take the time to write in. I will write you back, and we'll have a nice exchange. Okay, so there's that. I did the housekeeping. Now let's get on with a really fun and interesting interview with Dave Thomas.
Don't be alone with Jake Hogan.
Dave Thomas, thank you for being here.
Jay, it's a pleasure.
As everyone of my generation who loves comedy, you and your cohorts on SCTV are all heroes. You might not be comfortable with it. Maybe you're very comfortable with it. But the truth is, you shaped our lives.
I'm comfortable with it because it was very collaborative.
Right.
So it's not about me. It's about the group of people that I worked with.
All great comedy things are usually very collaborative and usually about the group. And people who watch it don't know that. They think it's just the one person who did the one thing. But that's never the case.
Yeah.
But that group of people to come together in that particular time, what a stroke of luck, whatever that was.
It was unusual, that's for sure.
Now, was everybody there from the Chicago Second City?
No, mostly Toronto.
Okay.
The Toronto Second City started in 72. No, 73. And Joe Flaherty and Brian Doyle Murray came up to start it with Bernie Solms, who ran it, and Dale Close.
Right.
And they held auditions, and Dan Aykroyd was looking for work, and Gilda Radner was in Toronto looking for work. She'd been in Godspell. Eugene was looking for work. He didn't get cast in the first show, but so they put a company together in Toronto that when I saw the first show, it was killer.
Right.
John Candy was in it. Joe Flaherty was in it. Eugene finally was in it. Dan Aykroyd was in it. And Gilda Radner and Andrea Martin. So that was a killer cast.
Amazing, yeah. Unbelievable.
Their ensemble work was fantastic, and their solo work was also.
And all these people, or many of these people, turned out to be not just great performers, but also good writers.
It's quite true, yes.
And then Second City promotes writing because, you start doing improvs, but the show is basically written, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really important.
We build the show, the Second City stage show, with improvs, refine them. Anything where you go out one night and a particular idea works in its first incarnation, then you try it again. We had tape recordings of it so we could play it back and hear what worked and what didn't work. And then you try to refine it and hone it and make it better. So that's writing, that's editing, that's writing.
And I imagine most of the improvs don't have great endings. You have to figure out endings.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes you discover the ending the first time out.
That's fantastic.
And then that's kind of locked in.
Right.
So you know where you're driving, you know where you're going.
That's fantastic. As an improviser at the Groundlings, I found that we had great characters, we had great conflicts, but we didn't necessarily have great endings. We had to figure those out.
I mean, when I saw Dan Aykroyd for the first time, I was a student of comedy. And you know how everybody, when they start out, you can see their roots from who they're doing. And Eugene was he had Jack Benny in him, and you'd see a lot of Jacks, slow takes and things like that. And this guy Aykroyd blows into town from Ottawa, and he's doing blue-collar comedy where the reference level of the blue-collar workers is so high and so detailed and so intricate that the audience is going, what the fuck, is he really a plumber?
Right.
How does he know that? Does he know how to fly a plane? How does he know that? And it gave dignity to comedy that had been belittled, and those kind of people were always treated as buffoons and clowns. But he treated these people as funny, but in a different way, and smart in their field.
Of course. And how did he? He did know a lot of jargon, or at least seemed to. How did he know all that stuff?
Well, when I worked on Spies Like Us with him, I found out, because I was working on another movie at the time for Joel Silver, and Universal took me off that movie and said, Aykroyd wants you to work with him on Spies Like Us. And I said, okay.
Joel Silver was famous for saying, I would stab myself in the back for that movie.
That's right.
Yeah.
And Rick Moranis impersonated him on SCTV. Right. So anyway, I went to Danny's. He had a bungalow there on the lot. And I went to his bungalow, and he says, great, I'm glad you're doing this, David. And there's a big steamer trunk full of books. And he said, we got to read every book in this steamer trunk before we put pen to paper. And they were all books about, mobile Soviet missile launchers, the Cold War capabilities of the USSR versus USA. And it was just so much data and information. And Danny had a great memory, but he researched and he read. And then that made it really clear to me how he got that comedy that was so novel and different than anything I'd ever seen.
So much of what's great and important about comedy is specificity and detail. Yeah. And so, like, a lot of us, when we're doing improv, we're just bullshitting and making stuff up. But if you have at your fingertips real details of stuff, you're going to make it that much better.
And even if the audience doesn't know the specificity, it rings true.
For sure.
And it resonates, and they kind of go, oh, what's this?
Right. It feels different. Like Ghostbusters felt different because of all the jargon and stuff that was being told to me. It had a pseudoscience verisimilitude that would go like, this could happen.
And that's Danny. Yeah. I mean, we were on stage one night, Danny and I.
Yeah.
And we were stealing a car, which is mime stuff. You were in the grounds, so you
space work. We call it space
two chairs sit beside each other. You mime the door, you get in, and then we're trying to start it, and it wouldn't start. And Danny was doing the and he did that a few times, and then you know how when you start to wear the battery down, it gets slower, and then I just went at the end, and he looked at me just with the look of delight, and he said, the solenoid? And I said, the solenoid. And just the fact that I knew that, he loved me. Do you know what I mean? And I was so happy to be able to meet him on his level of specificity.
Yeah.
The hard part of all of it is that most comedy goes on too long.
Right.
And people forget that commercials took people's attention span and condensed it.
Right.
You can say an awful lot in 30 seconds. So that yardstick was something that comedy could be measured by too. I found that 2-3 minutes was a really good sort of weight for a little comedy sketch.
Right.
There are sketches on stage, especially group sketches or sketches that explore relationships, that could go on 3 to 5 minutes, and that makes sense too.
Mm-hmm.
And rarely does it go on beyond that.
I heard a funny story, something about you and Del Close. I don't know. At a certain point, maybe did you were at Second City? Was Del the?
Yeah, he was directing one show.
Okay. He was kind of a weird guy, and he did a lot of weird things. And at a certain point,
Del was insane.
Right.
I mean, you're being very kind.
Right. Well, I didn't
love
have
Del. Okay, Del was really funny.
Okay, but
Del was a great guy,
Right.
but he was insane, ridiculously self-indulgent.
Right.
And he fired me in a rehearsal, which was really, he couldn't fire me because he didn't have the authority to do that.
Right.
And I knew that at the time. But it was a scene that he wanted to do where he said to me, and he would do this occasionally because he had a history of drug abuse, a history of a lot of therapy and psychiatric problems, and his father had died mysteriously.
Right.
And if you follow Del's narratives, there's different reasons why his dad
it constantly
died.
changing. The story was constantly
So
changing.
Anything that made a better story
Exactly.
was what. So Del wanted to recreate the scene. He was playing on our heartstrings, where he found out that his dad died from drinking sulfuric acid, and he wanted me to be the doctor to give him the news, and he was going to play himself.
Right.
And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. We're doing rehearsals to build a show.
Right.
Del isn't in the cast. Why are we doing a scene where he plays a pivotal role, if not for some self-indulgent reason that So I said, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
And he says, what? I said, I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. Del, it makes no sense. You shouldn't be in the scene. It's very self-indulgent. I'm not doing it. And he said, theater is not a democracy. I'm the director. You do what I say. And I said, nah. I said, no. Theater should work. Second City Theater should work towards building a show.
Right.
And you as the director should be really somebody that we look up to as somebody that relentlessly works to that goal and not other...
Right. Not side projects guiding us towards the
tertiary
ultimate goals.
Exactly.
Right.
Anyway, he said, you're fired. And I said, okay, well, all right. I said, I don't think so, but I'll leave.
Right.
So I left, and then Andrew Alexander called me later, and he said, you coming in tonight? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, good. He said, Del told me he fired you. I said, yeah, but I knew he didn't have the authority to do that, and unless you're firing me, then I'll be in.
Mm-hmm.
So then I had to come in and face Del, because we're doing the show, and he's there.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't really say anything during the actual show itself. He was pissed off, And I said, about halfway through the show, I said, hey, why don't I give you a ride home after the show? And he looks at me, he goes, okay. So I gave him a ride home. And I said, look, Del, I wanted to talk to you because he said, what I did was wrong. You did exactly the right thing. You remind me of me. That's exactly what I would have done. And I was just like, okay, well, that's nice. But I just want you to know I respect you. I think you're a funny guy. I think you have a lot to give us. But I can't stand it when you do these really self-indulgent, digressions. And so anyway, we mended fences and I drove him home, but he was crazy as could be the next night. You know?
I think there's fair amount of evidence that his dad did not die in any of the ways that he said it.
Absolutely. But certainly not from drinking sulfuric acid.
Right.
Don't be alone
A lot of people I know are in improv. My one of my very first mentors in improv, Phyllis Katz, said that the only reason she got into improv in Chicago is because Joe Flaherty enlisted her. She said, you should try that. Like, he was, she was just around the theater and he said, you want to try it? You should try it. Like, he was very encouraging to get people to do that. And I worked with Joe on The Wrong Guy with Dave Foley.
Right.
And of course, he too was a hero. Interestingly, I never really understood the machinations of how SCTV, the TV show, was made, and how you were writing a lot of it and he was trying to write a lot of it, and you guys were at a certain point overwhelmed by budget, time, all the stuff that was going on that was happening. And
a show that has a problem with its inception is doomed to have problems, and that was SCTV.
Right. Because what was the problem with its inception?
Bernie Sahlins decided when Lorne Michaels started Saturday Night Live that Lorne was stealing all his cast from his stage shows and that he should do a TV show.
Right.
Problem is, there already was one on and it was a hit.
Right.
So he decides to launch a SCTV, which was at Second City Television at that time. SCTV was a later name for the show. And so it was doomed from the fact that we couldn't get the financing for budgets, and we got a production deal from Global TV in Canada. It was like next to nothing.
Right.
And I remember the one meeting Bernie had with the Global TV executives, and he said, they said, well, who's going to direct the show? And this guy, Milad Basada, who was a director of news and cooking shows, that's all he had ever done. Bernie said, you're a director, aren't you? Why don't you direct it?
Right.
And so it was that kind of carelessness.
When things were falling apart, sometimes at SCTV, I remember you telling me that at some point they needed you to help sort of pick up the ball in terms of the writing and in terms of the producing, something that you didn't want to do.
Well, here's the genealogy of it. Harold Ramis was our head writer in the first season. Well, he was a great head writer.
Right.
As we saw from his career after that, and even during the time that he did SCTV, he was writing Animal House with two other writers, Chris Miller and Doug Kenny. So, and he had been Playboy joke editor, so he had this catalog of jokes, and he was a really smart guy, real high IQ. And so his memory was great, and that allowed him to have a great reference level, all the things that are absolutely necessary to be a good comedy writer. And he had experience, which none of us had. So Harold ran the show for the first year, and then he left. Well, when he left, the logical choice of the person to run the show was Joe. But Harold said to Andrew, no, Joe will quit. Joe can't do the administrative stuff that is required in this job, and you should make Dave and Joe do it together, because Dave will do the administrative stuff. So
they knew you were the hard ass. What was that? What was that?
Well, but I was the guy that would look at the board and go, we need this done, and we need it done by tomorrow. You know what I mean? So, and it makes you unpopular. There's no question about that. But I remember saying to Harold, when he made that decision, I said, why did you make me I understand why you made Joe why you asked Andrew to make Joe the head writer. Why'd you make me? And he said, because Joe will quit probably within 3 months.
Right.
And he did.
Right.
Because it just wasn't what Joe wanted to do. Joe was an artist. He was very misanthropic and very eccentric and unusual and hard to get a hold of. If you have a meeting at 9:00, you'd be lucky if Joe was there at noon.
Right.
And so that kind of stuff on a television schedule is just
impossible.
A disaster.
Right.
So that's what happened. And then finally, I'm running it alone. And then after the third season, I invited Rick Moranis in because we were short on cast, and he was an amazing writer and a great...
And where do you know Rick from?
I met him at a party.
Okay.
And we two of us just started improvising together, and I thought, wow, this guy's fast and really funny. So I saw him. I did some research on him, and then I went to Andrew because we were down in between the second and third seasons. Andrea Martin and Eugene Levy had left the show to go to Los Angeles to try and get into sitcoms. Catherine was taking a year off, was just tired of doing it. John Candy was doing his own show, Big City Comedy. So we needed, if we're going to do the show, we need a cast. And Andrew got this facility deal to replace Global, who dropped us in Edmonton.
Right.
So there's also the feeling that we were the B team to Saturday Night Live. We were first doing the show in Toronto, and then to keep the show alive, we have to move to Edmonton.
Right.
Then it seems like, well, what's next? White Horse?
Siberia.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. So anyway, it was hard to get people motivated. I convinced Catherine, I convinced Eugene and Andrea to do like a couple of weeks of shooting, and then we'd feed their stuff in between all the shows.
Yeah, because as a fan, I didn't know they were not part of that show.
Right, and it seemed like they were, because
exactly.
there was enough of their pieces to give them a presence in the show. But we still needed to cover for John and Catherine, and so I got Rick Moranis to join the cast, and then Joe Flaherty invited Tony Rosato and Robin Duke.
Right.
So that was our third season cast. Well, Moranis and I had a real good rhythm going in that year, because he was just so fast. And I had this job of head writer, and it was like an empty board of 26 shows, and you got to fill all the cards. And I'm like, oh, God. And he's there, Moranis, okay, how about this? Okay, how about this? And I'm just like, holy crap.
Right.
So we ended up doing a lot of duos. We ended up doing Bob Hope and Woody Allen.
Right.
We ended up doing Cronkite and Brinkley. We ended up doing the McKenzie Brothers.
Did you know, by the way, you did a good Bob Hope imitation before you did a Bob Hope imitation?
No. Brian Doyle Murray was responsible for that.
Okay.
And the makeup woman,
Okay.
Bev Scheckman.
Fantastic. One of the great Bob Hope imitations. Was there Chester Hope? Is there Bob Hope's son or something?
I played Chester Hope at his 90th birthday party.
Yeah.
His nephew.
Okay, that was it.
Well, anyway, we're out there in Edmonton, and we've got this cast, and the season ends, and we don't know whether the show's going to get picked up again. What we didn't know was that Brandon Tartikoff was watching the show and thinking about putting it in on Friday nights, because Belushi and Aykroyd were making noises about leaving at SNL and doing Blues Brothers, and he thought he was either going to groom a cast to replace those people
or leverage
or another show on Friday.
Right. Also, it's a good negotiating tool. If I've got another comedy show on Friday night, then you can't hold me up on Saturday night.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and they're into those big monikers, the Tonight Show, the Today Show. They like to own real estate in television. And so if he could get Friday night with us, I think he was excited about that. But we didn't know this at the time. So Moranis and I go to L.A., and I had done a pilot with CBS and become friends with the guy running it, Harvey Shepard. And I bet your dad worked with him.
My dad knew Harvey Shepard, yes, and liked him,
He had the world's worst wig.
Yeah.
But he had an automatic switch on his door, at his desk, that closed his door. So you'd walk in, and then he'd do this. He'd just tap it, and the door would close. Right. And you'd look behind you. It was like a haunted house.
Sure. You know? I first ran into that in 20th Century Fox sometime in 1987. There's a magnet that's attached to the door, and you press the button, and you release through electromagnetism, release the magnet power, and the door closes.
Right.
But it has a thud. Like it's all about intimidation. I have no idea why people just couldn't close the door.
And Harvey loved that.
Yeah, of course.
So you'd see his eyes twinkle when he did it, you know. So anyway, Moranis and I sold him a show, the two of us doing a two-hander, because we cut together a bunch of clips of this stuff that we'd done.
Right.
Then we find out Brandon Tartikoff has approached John Candy and wants to put together the cast. So we get a call from John Candy in Toronto, and he's like, guys, you got to come. We're NBC wants us to do a show.
Right.
And it's a 90-minute show. on Fridays.
Right.
And I'm like, 90 minutes. Whoa.
It's a lot of time.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know if we could do that. And then I'm stuck with, we don't know what to do. Rick and I've got this deal now
Right.
that's not signed yet, but anyway, we went to Toronto.
You've got this show that you and Rick have, and you don't know what's going to be big. You have no idea what's going to work.
Nope.
So what led you to join everybody in Toronto and do the 90-minute show?
It was a gut feeling. And the gut feeling was that these people were good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I knew Candy was a star. I knew he was
Right.
going to break out. I knew Flaherty was really good. I knew Catherine was really good. And I knew Eugene was really good. So it was just like, and Andrea is just a force of nature.
Right.
So I thought, there's too many, you can't fill a show with just two people.
Mm-hmm.
Even a half-hour show gets thin, and you need a support cast.
Right.
So who would we get? Then we got to find a new support cast. There's a support cast in Toronto right there. So, and not a support cast
Right.
either. But
Right. It's all stars.
yeah,
One of the things about my show is I have always a burning question of my own that I always approach a guest with. And one of the reasons you're here, other than huge fan of yours, also like you as a friend, like your kid, like you're like all that, is you seem to have made a lifetime of interesting and good choices in show business. In other words, when something falls out, you find another route. You find when there's a problem, you find a solution. When there's a opportunity to go into animation or an opportunity to go into drama you find your way to those things where a lot of people are just stuck in one position. So when you make a decision like this, where it could be your show and you're in Rick's show, and you decide, no, I'm going to veer to this other group thing, it's fascinating to me. Like you seem to have these instincts or at least the drive to get you where you want to go.
well, you got to drive in this business or you're dead. I mean,
Well, I may
think
be
it's
dead, so I don't know.
It's like talent,
Right.
luck is really big,
Mhm.
and drive is really. Those are the three
Right.
magic ingredients. And if you can make it on one on two of them, but you can't make it on one of them,
Right.
and you can't make it with none of them. So I have considered that I react,
Mm-hmm.
not that I have this amazing intuition or anything like
No,
that.
but I would agree that you're reacting to the situation, but a lot of people don't react in that situation or are stuck in one position.
I took a job as a copywriter in advertising
yeah.
because I went for 6 months without getting any work before Second City started. And then I said to Eugene and Marty, I said, I'm not going to be a waiter who tells people that he's in showbiz,
You'll be an advertising executive.
And well, I knew how to write. I thought I could write
Sure.
because I was good at essays in school. So I wrote a bunch of fake ads, and I got the Yellow Pages, which was the Google of the day. And I went through and I called every ad agency till I got to the M's at McCann Erickson. I got hired. Temporary job, like on trial for 6 months, $8,500 a year, and I was working as a junior writer on the Coca-Cola account, which sounds prestigious, except that you were doing the retail stuff, which is just big bottles of Coca-Cola standing next to Pepsi bottles, trying to look frostier and better, and stupid copy that makes, it was awful. But then I got an opportunity to do a contest, and this is, again, a luck turn that happened in my career. They had a contest in the retail area of Coke, and it was called Capital Caps. And so underneath the cap of each bottle, there's a number or a token. And if you get the right token, you could win up to $10,000, something like that. So I get the job of writing that, and I get the legal copy that's required for the 30-second spot. And there's literally 28 and a half seconds of legal copy.
Right.
So there's
Right.
no room for anything. And I was thinking, well, how can I make this fun and interesting? Then I remembered this bit that Don Knotts used to do on the old Tonight Show, where he was a weatherman, and he had like charts that snapped up unexpectedly and pointers that broke and,
Right.
and too much information.
Right.
to be able to convey in a short period. That was the gag. And
Right.
I had a similar problem with this spot.
Right.
So I thought, all right. So I wrote a bit like that. And I took it to the creative director. I said, here's my spot. And he says, this is great, but Coca-Cola is never going to improve it if they just read this, because they're not going to visualize it.
You have to just show them.
You have to go up there and pitch this to them. And I said, okay. So I went up to Coke and I pitched it, and they loved it.
Right.
And then they said, who do you see being the guy in this? And I didn't expect that question. And I just said, Tim Conway. So within a week, I was on a plane to LA to shoot this spot with Tim Conway. And the spot was a huge success. Then Coca-Cola Canada said they fired the head writer for Coca-Cola Canada and made me the head writer. And I'd only been in advertising for 3 months.
Right.
And so it went like that.
Right.
And I had lucky breaks like that, the formula that we were talking about.
Right.
And I mean, I was ballsy enough to go up to Coke to pitch it, and clever enough to come up with a bit that worked for the problem, but lucky enough that they went for it and cast Tim Conway.
Right.
All of a sudden, it was a hit.
Don't be alone with Jake Hogan.
You had an animation company, right? And,
Yes.
Okay. So you're trying to make show business not just as a performer and as a writer, but also just like, as an owner.
3 of us formed this company called Animax. Me, Dan Graney
Yeah.
from The Simpsons, and Andy Bain, Dan's friend, who was a business guy, who'd graduated Yale, MBA, went over to USSR when it collapsed and bought some businesses in Ukraine at a real bargain.
Sure.
So one of the things he bought was an animation company. So the plan was to outsource to the Ukraine for cheap labor and underbid local animation companies and get some stuff going. Well, Dan and Andy got into an argument, and Dan quit. And then it was just me and Andy. But Andy was also in the U.S. Marines reserves. And then the war in Iraq breaks out, and Andy says, I'm going over. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, I'm going to the war. And I said, what about the animation company?
Right.
So he leaves me to run it, and he goes off to Iraq.
Right.
Well, that was a tough thing. And now all of a sudden I've got these animators on staff.
Right. You have to find something for them to do.
And and it was selling animation is really hard because there's only a few places that buy it. And at that time it was like Nickelodeon, Disney, and there was always
Cartoon
the bait
Network
or
or
Fox.
something, yeah.
But they didn't really buy anything.
No, yeah.
They just they were looking for family comedies like The Simpsons or Family Guy, and that's all they wanted. So it was a hard job. Then Andy comes back. This story is worth telling.
Okay. I was going to cut you off, but go ahead.
He comes back from Iraq,
Right.
and I said, so are you done? He said, yeah, they sent me back. I said, why? He said, well, when I got over there, they weren't giving any of the he was a colonel. He said they weren't giving any of the mid-ranking officers positions on bases that mattered. They thought too many of the reserve guys were trying to get in the action. So they sent me to a base in the South. And he said, I was at this base in the South, and he said, then all of a sudden this 400 Army engineers show up. And he's like, who are you guys? Right. And he calls CENTCOM, and they say, oh yeah, sorry, we meant to tell you they were coming. We overestimated the number of weapons of mass destruction that we were going to find, and sending these guys home now will be embarrassing for us. So just keep them down in there at that base, out of the way, until we can figure out what to do with them. So Andy says, okay, then he's sitting having a beer with this Army engineer one day and looking at sand dunes, and he said, "See that sand dune from there to there? That'd be a great dog's leg par 4." And the Army engineer says, "We can build you a golf course if you want." And Andy said, "What do you mean?" He said, "We're Army engineers. We could build you a fucking skyscraper in the middle of this desert." So Andy said, "Okay, let's do it."
Right.
And I said, "Well, where'd you get the material?" And Andy just laughed. He said, "I just sent CENTCOM memos saying that I was worried that insurgents were going to compromise my ammo bunkers." He said, "I got all the POs for concrete and rebar, everything I need."
Right.
So Andy builds a clubhouse and a pool first for a golf course.
Right.
And he's building a golf course. Then a regiment of Ukrainian soldiers show up. CENTCOM knew that Andy spoke Ukrainian and had businesses in the Ukraine. He also speaks fluent Russian. And so the Ukrainians say, Andy meets the head guy, and he knows they're all black market guys.
Sure.
And Andy says, "Where's the vodka?" And the guy says, "Don't insult me. We are the finest." And Andy says, "Where's the vodka? You either give me the vodka or you can't sleep on the base." So Andy said within 3 days, 2 Deuce trucks, that's trucks with 2,000-pound cargo, full of booze show up.
Right.
That these Ukrainians got.
They
got this.
This clubhouse full of booze.
They got a pool,
Right.
a cabana, booze, and they're building the front 9, and the Ukrainians are going to get them grass that doesn't need water.
Right.
Then the generals come around, the brass come around touring all the bases, and they see this golf course that they're building. "What's this?" And Andy says, "Well, idle hands is the devil's playground. I just got these guys."
Right.
So they got pissed off and just sent Andy and everybody home.
So they never got to play golf.
But that's weird,
Yeah,
right?
no, very strange. Well, it's not. What's not weird is there were no weapons of mass destruction, so they overestimated by a factor of everything.
I know.
So,
So Andy tells me this story, and I go, that's a show.
Right. Subversive military things always seem to excite me. I'm always happy with it.
And then this has another life, because then in April of this year, Andy says to me, he stayed in Ukraine when the war started, and he's been there helping them, and he founded this company, this charity called the Ukrainian Freedom Fund. And so he's like, he calls me and he says, "You're a Canadian with a media presence, and there are 1 million Ukrainians in Canada. We're trying to build a donor base. Would you come here and help us build a donor base, and do some press, and maybe do some interviews while you're here?" And so I said, "All right, why not?" So I went to Ukraine, and it was like something I never expected to see.
Yeah, it's pretty eye-opening when you get there to see
It's a war zone.
Sure. And see people who stayed to fight, and see how the people who are there are trying to hang on, and it's very touching and difficult.
It is. It really is.
And it's amazing that you went. As a matter of fact, you were going to do my show at a certain point. You had to hop on a plane to go to Ukraine. I remember that. It was just fantastic. I was like, "You're going where? Why?" And but you did. Eventually, I understood. why.
Yeah.
I want to back up for a second. So, SCTV, one of the breakout things of SCTV were the McKenzie Brothers. So, and they have a very interesting origin, which is, I guess you had to make some Canadian content.
When Brandon Tartikoff picked up the show in the 3rd season, and ran it in the NBC O&Os, CBC was the broadcaster that broadcasted it in Canada. And CBC had 2 minutes of less commercial time, which meant that they needed 2 minutes of program content that weren't in the American shows. And so they said to the producers, "We want that 2 minutes of content to be distinctively Canadian." So I'm head writer, and I'm sitting working late with Moranis, and Andrew Alexander comes in. He says, "This is what CBC wants. They want 2 minutes." I said, "What do they want? Do they want they want us to put up a map of Canada, dressed in parkas and toques, and to drink beer?" And he said, "Fine, do that. And if you could have a Mountie, and that would be even better." So we did these 2-minute spots, and they were all exactly 2 minutes. And because they were such a low risk part of the program content of the show, not seen in the U.S. at all, Rick and I decided we're not going to write them. We're just going to improvise them. So we would get a 10 count in from the floor director, and then it'd go to us, and then we would wing it.
Right.
Get a 5 count out, and we'd have to wrap it up. And then some of them would be good. Most of them would be really shitty. But if in an hour we got 2-minute sketches in an hour of shooting, that was program efficient to the producers, you know?
Right. Here's another thing. You went into drama writing, to writing mysteries and dramas, Bones, you know, all these other shows. How did you get there from the world of comedy?
The move to drama isn't that weird because comedy was changing at the time that I made the jump, and it was becoming very woke and very precious, and you couldn't say anything without people getting bummed out and pissed off.
Right. And not in that form, not on TV. Yeah. It was, things were more restricted. Yeah.
So I knew Hart Hansen, who ran Bones, and he said to me, I was talking to him about what the hell am I going to do? He said, why don't you come up with 5 really interesting ways to kill somebody? I said, really? He said, yeah, just do that and send them to me.
Right.
I said, okay. So one of them he really liked was bullets made of frozen blood. And so, because then it would leave no trace, you know. They gave me an offer to write a script based on that. So I wrote the script, and I went in and worked with the writing room, and it was fun.
Yeah.
I really loved the intricacies of procedural, but I also loved the fact that you had an extra 20 minutes of content that would allow you to tell a story.
Right.
Because you can't tell a story in a sitcom.
It's impossible.
Yeah. And hence the term sitcom, you are reacting to a situation. Oh, my mother-in-law is coming. What are we going to do?
But by that time, it had gotten worse and worse, too. Commercials had gotten more and more, and the amount of time for the actual show was something like 19 minutes and 30 seconds. Very small amount of time to have a cold open, the beginning of the story, and then how it advances and how it ends. It's almost over before it begins.
That's right.
Yeah.
And some guys, like you guys on Frasier, were artists in the way you handled that. And I was so thrilled to watch that. But I don't think I had that kind of skill. So I went into drama. And after I'd written that script, they all liked the script. Then they said, would you come on as a consulting producer? And I said, yeah. So they made me an offer, and I joined them, and I worked there for 3 years. I had a great time.
That's fantastic. And you also did Blacklist, right?
Yeah.
Which is also a really smart, interesting show. All right. Well, now it's time for listener mail.
Now it's time for listener mail.
This is from Stuart. He said, listening to Cliff Nesteroff and then having watched the Tom Brady roast and having listened to you complain on occasion about not being able to say things inappropriately in comedy these days, exactly what we were just talking about. Based on what I know about you, I would assume tough to hear jokes is what comedy should be doing, pushing the boundaries. You should be allowed to offend and be cruel. Did you like the roasts about white guys sucking dicks and blasting Giselle and Kim Kardashian and making women the butt of many jokes? Where's the edge of appropriate to inappropriate in comedy?
I remember seeing some roasts, like David Hasselhoff roast, where he was kind of down. He had done this video of drunk eating a burger.
Oh, right. And
everybody was just piling on him and beating him up.
Right.
And I remember getting mad at that roast, thinking, this is not the idea of a roast.
Cheap shot.
Yeah, the roast should be taking these shots at someone who is up.
Right.
Someone who is at the top of their game, but not perfect. And so let's trim, let's give them a haircut.
Right.
That is the spirit behind what I think a good roast should be, not piling on somebody who's down. And
which is also, you could say, the spirit of comedy. Comedy isn't about picking on the weak. It's about taking down the strong.
Absolutely. And the strong who are doing things that aren't right.
Of course. Yeah.
And, so those are the boundaries for me.
Right.
And it's the intention behind it and the target that make all the difference to what whether I think you can go as far as you want when you're making fun of
Right.
of somebody who deserves to be made fun of, you know?
Right. But I mean, for example, if I wanted to make a joke about Jewish people or black people or how Jewish people and black people get together, that is tricky territory these days, more than it was a while ago, because people don't assume intention is good. They don't care about intention anymore. They just say, well, you said something that could offend somebody.
The other thing is they quote you out of context. They'll take a clip that's only part of what you said and then judge that as the entire thing.
But I do think that in years past and decades past, people have been hurt by their portrayal in the media. They have been hurt unfairly or judged unfairly, that stereotypes, where people were leading with stereotypes and not the humanity of people. So that's fair. But again, you talk about intention. If somebody's coming to you from a fairly evolved intention and just seeing the world for what it is and trying to make fun of everybody, including themselves, I think that should be fair game.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, Dave Chappelle's stand-up, where he got in trouble because he went on a rant about this trans person that was at one of his shows. Mm-hmm. That was a love letter to that trans person, and that was not offensive or mean-spirited at all. But the people who quoted how how Ted Sarandos had to take him off,
right,
and that, you know, he's got to be stopped, they were not listening to what he said, and they were stupid people.
They feel that you've touched this third rail of identity of any kind, and you're not allowed to touch it. And I think that's not fair, because if you're sitting in a world and you're an artist and you're an observer, you get to observe everything.
Absolutely.
At least you should be able to.
Yeah, and you know, without the, you know, George Carlins of the world that mocked Catholicism relentlessly, because he saw all the hideous inconsistencies and lies.
Right. Hypocrisy in government, in religion, and everything. Yeah. Dave, we have this thing called the moment of joy.
A moment of joy.
I had an old car, a 57 Cadillac convertible.
Were you Elvis Presley at any time in your life?
No. I know he gave people cars.
Sure.
But this car was like, I restored it, and I polished the chrome, and I drove it around, and I play Sinatra songs as I'm driving in this old Cadillac. And I do love that old Hollywood, old LA. I would love to be driving around here in, say, 1946, 1947, up to, say, 52. There's a movie I love called Mulholland Falls. Mm-hmm. Most people don't know about it. It's Nick Nolte, Chaz Palminteri, Chris Penn, and Michael Marsden as cops in the Hat Squad. And they're driving around in this 1948 Buick Roadmaster convertible, black with a red interior. It's just, I had such a great time being part of LA, and I think it was Lalo Schifrin who did the music. And nobody knows LA better than him.
Sure.
And so I love that film. And so I would be fantasizing in my Cadillac that I was in that
part
era,
of that group.
You know.
So Dave, thank you for being here.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
This is so great. I've wanted to have you in for a long time, and thank you for sharing all this stuff, and thank you for all the comedy and all the great stuff you've done over the years. And, you know, it's nice to be able to meet one of your heroes and know that you're a great guy.
Thank you.
So that's awesome. I'm really pleasure. And thank you for being here. My audience, please write me at DBAWJK and like the show and like it, whatever, you share it, all that stuff you're supposed to do. But more importantly, sit down with somebody cool and have a fucking conversation one-on-one with somebody. You'll be so better off than just sitting in your house looking at TikTok.
That's right.
I mean, that's what I'd say. So anyway, well, until next time, I'll see you later.
Don't be alone with Jay.